And here we are, episode number 60 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. I am Vince, and with me, as always, my compatriot and good friend, Mike. Mike, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Vince. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. It is, we're in exciting times, as it were, as we're still in the midst of a pandemic, technically, but things are starting to open up. It's, I've got a lot of things planned for the fall as far as travel, which is nice.
That's what I hear. I hear
almost
like
2 years.
Everybody's opening up for travel.
Yeah.
Everybody's opening up for travel. Here in Toronto, that's been locked down the most. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing of concerts in late October, early November, like actual sitting down beside another person and listening to music.
Oh my gosh.
And not through your headphones.
And not through your headphones. That's
unbelievable.
Amazing. Yeah. That is amazing. That's amazing. I wonder though how they're going to do that, because I mean we're almost like starting from scratch again. Like it's almost as if we need new processes, we need new approaches, we need new strategy, we need all this new stuff. And we are not, historically, organizations and people are not good at developing new processes. We just sort of accept the fact that it's going to be pretty crappy and it'll get better over time, but initially it can get crappy. And you know what? I'm not so sure that has to be the case.
Well, I mean, when you say, if everybody thinks that the concert experience is to be the same as it was like 3 Octobers ago, right? Like there's going to be new ways of doing things, new ways of running a business, and which all lead to new processes. And on the work that I do, when we're building digital products, we really take like how fast can we get these things out? So, we have an idea that meets a customer need, and then we insert like what the business rules and priorities and processes are. But then we, like from a real tactical perspective, right? We build a prototype, and you've seen this. We build a prototype, we throw it in front of a few people. We're like, yep, we've got a lot of the usability things out of the way. We think it's a winner. It does the customer job that we're looking for. We may not have everything worked out, but let's throw it out there and see if the customer, if it meets customer need. If it does, then we're done. If it doesn't, then we have to iterate, right? So because we don't want to over-engineer products. And so then you get it out there, you get the feedback, you make it better, and then you keep iterating. And so that works historically, that's been working lately for digital products. But can one do that when it comes to new processes? Because historically, we haven't done that.
Yeah. And it might surprise you to know that, no, that's not possible. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not. Okay.
Podcast over. I'm just kidding. Podcast over.
One today, kids.
3 minutes and we're done. No, of course. I mean, you can treat your process like a product. And that should probably be the title of the episode. Your process can be a product, especially as you're developing something new. So, I mean, the folks that listen to the show know, I come with a heavy Lean Six Sigma background, and Lean Six Sigma has a methodology, a framework, whatever you want to call it, called DMAIC. It's an acronym. We love acronyms in business. It's an acronym that stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And these are the stages, the steps that you take. And there's tools and things that you do within each phase. But these are the steps that you take to solve a problem when you are engaged in continuous improvement. Which means the process exists, you want to make it better. What a lot of people don't know, and I learned this as part of my master black belt training, was that there's also several different frameworks and methodologies that are for net new processes. and it comes from the school of design for Six Sigma, which is all about designing your process with that continuous improvement and that quality built in. And so, in DMAIC, we use define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. There are several others. I like the one that is DMATIV. It's not when you get too many consonants, the acronym doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all.
It doesn't work as well. But it's define, measure, analyze, design, verify. So you're going through, similar phases where you are defining the outcome, defining the customer requirements, defining the parameters. You're measuring, how many people you're going to need. You're measuring how many customers and transactions you're looking to address. You're measuring. Analyzing, you're doing some statistical analysis to focus in on your output, your inputs rather. Design, which is all about business design, process design. So it's actually piecing the thing together, and then verify. So you have this process. Does it work? Does it scratch that customer itch? Does it address that organizational pain point? Does it do what you need it to do? Much like a product. And much like a product, you're also engaging with, instead of customers, you're engaging with the staff that are going to be working with this process to ensure that it works for them. So this is where, I've historically leveraged like a model office. Does this build into what's already going on? Because that's like one of the biggest mistakes I see model offices make is they look at processes in silos. So it's like, does this process make sense? Yes, it does. Okay, cool. Does it make sense within the broader ecosystem of process and of all the things going on? Because you may, as you're writing your isolated test, the document goes where it needs to go. But does it go where it needs to go while everything else is happening too? So this is where you can see through a model office or through some sort of prototype that whether the process is going to give you what you need from it. It's fascinating stuff.
So I guess my question there is, when we we put out an MVP for a product, we gather feedback, and then we push out like a change because the customer felt pain, or when you're doing that for process, does that cause too much change within the process, which causes too much change for staff? And when you're doing that, is there a chance of them getting confused? I think that's where because we try and iterate quickly on, like, let's say a feature set to help customers. But when it comes to staff, you go through a lot of change work to get them on the new process. And then, this was only like a prototype process. So now we're going to iterate on that. Is there like a chance that it won't work because of that?
Well, I mean, so there's always a chance, always. And that comes down to your organizational culture and your organizational appetite for change and how change ready are your people. That being said, you typically, as part of the design and the validate or the verify, like you have to figure out what works for you. So I have never blasted that out to an entire area and said, okay, this is remember, this is new process.
Right.
So you can take a subset of a team, for example, and say, we are designing a new process for a particular, a new customer segment that we're going to try to meet or try to address, a new document that we're taking in, a new intake type, whatever. So you can actually essentially run a pilot that allows you to work out the bugs and iterate very rapidly before deploying out to the broader group. Much like a product, right? So you're containing that pain of change to a small group. And you probably want to leverage people that are open to change or more willing to change, or so you definitely can do that, but you don't want to then deploy a process and say on Monday, this is the new process, find where all the bugs are on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday say, oh, by the way, this is the new process.
Right. So so as you were talking, I thought about something. Is there the concept of like on products you can A/B test? There's lots of A/B testing on a website, or so do you get a better conversion if your button is here as opposed to here, if it's a different color, and then you test one layout or one design with a group of customers, and then another group of customers get a completely different layout? Is there that same concept in the process world where you don't know which way to go, so you have some of your team doing one process and the other doing the other one, and then you rapidly test that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you can whether you want to call it A/B testing or just like you can do that. Now then, understand that things are going to take longer because now you've got to go through a testing period where you're assessing user behavior and user acceptance. So it just means things are going to take longer. But you could. I guess my question is, my pushback would be, if you need to do that A/B testing, it means that you probably miss something as part of the defining phase of defining what the customer requirements are, or the user requirements, defining what the business needs from the process. So I mean, I shouldn't need to get into, because the way that I look at process, like, do you like the button here or the button there? To me, it actually doesn't matter. The process is the process. If somebody has an easier time with a big button in the middle of the page versus something smaller at the top, cool. But the process is still, you need to click that button, right? Where it's positioned, I really don't care. So this is where you can then leverage some of the knowledge within your UX team or your more traditional graphic design team to say, from a process perspective, I don't care where the button is and what color it is and what the words are. What I care about is, does it do what it needs to do to advance the process along?
So sorry, what I'm digging at is, in the process, let's not in the process of a product, but in the business process, as you're designing it, maybe you have a difference of opinion. Like, we could, the process could be this thing or it could be this thing. And I was just equating it to A/B testing in products. So let's park that for now. We can either go this way or this way. Arguments for both, passion on both sides. Is there and I don't know if it translates, is there a way to go, okay, we'll take these group of 5 people, run them, they'll do this process, these 5 people do this process, and we'll let the data decide if which way is the way to go? Is that or does that cause more problems?
No, I mean, that definitely could work, right? You just then collect data. So it really depends on what is your intended outcome. If path A is faster, but you have more mistakes, path B is slower, but you have fewer mistakes, then it's a business decision. Which do you want, right? Do you want to go fast? This is like Ricky Bobby in Talladega. Do you want to go fast? Or do you want to do it right? And so it comes down to a strategic decision. If you collect data and they truly perform equally, then it's really down to preference. So somebody has to make that decision, which way do we go? But this is where then defining what those key metrics are and those key measures of what matters and why are you designing this net new process? What are you hoping to get out of it? Because I mean, ideally, you want to be both fast and effective, right?
Correct.
So if you do have that question of, which way should we go, and you want to run, I mean, yeah, you could.
Mm-hmm. And if we go back to the missing pieces of transformation, one of the missing pieces was decision making.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go down this route, that conversation now becomes much more important, because if you're going to be much more iterative on the process, then you need to have your people. That you have the people that are working on the transformation to be able to iterate through those processes quicker, and without the governance, because then it won't work. Like, this kind of agile way of building process doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, speed is key, right? Because you want to get this process out as quickly as you can, so that it can start to give you the benefits that you're expecting. Mm-hmm. So, but again, it's down to culture. If you're an organization that is top heavy and all paths go through, the C-suite for approval, then like this is going to take a long time.
This won't work.
No, it'll work. It will take longer before you start seeing the benefits.
Sure.
Right? Because now you've got to go and present to somebody, and then they get you, so you go, you're a manager, and you go and present to your boss, and then your boss, this is great, we need to present to my boss, and then you go to present to that, and then this is great, we need to go present. Like, if you're top heavy and you've got to get the approval of your chief or your president or your director or whatever your chain ends at, wherever your chain ends, it just, like, these people are not available on a whim. You're looking at, I got to book you 3 weeks in advance. You know what I mean?
Which slows things down. Which doesn't help with iteration, especially if something goes wrong. It doesn't help at all. So this, hey, let's prototype a process, and then we'll iterate on it, doesn't really help if you don't have the autonomy to do that.
Correct. And I mean, you've heard me say, and folks that have been on the show or been with the show for a while have heard me say, when it comes to process, you have to have the process owner in the room, that they can make decisions, that they can set the path, because otherwise, if every decision has to get kicked upstairs for a decision or for resolution, like, it just, what are you doing? So it's important that you have those people.
Not much.
And that doesn't change whether you're talking about, DMAIC or DMATIV or DMEDI or whatever. It doesn't change. You still want to have the person who has the ultimate accountability for the process to be in the room, helping you design it for the future, because they'll then be able to represent their needs, their business requirements, their rules, all the stuff that they need to see reflected. They're in the room helping you design it.
I think if we go back to that model office, to me, it's super important to be able to test the process against your hypothesis, what you thought was going to happen, test it against what you thought the customer journey was going to be, and then also test it against what you thought, just as important, the employee experience is going to be.
Right.
And so if you don't do those things, and yes, you can iterate, we could be fancy, but if you don't, in that test phase, if you don't test against those things, you're not truly getting everything out of the data that you would need to see if you should even go live, or what you need to iterate to.
Right. Now, then it does present another sort of challenge. Like, these projects, are varying amounts of time. So you could work through one in, a week, let's say. And so, start the project on Monday. By Friday, you know what you're going to do. You've prototyped. It's fairly straightforward. It's generally not that fast, but it could be.
It could be.
then you have to then get into the, again, back to culture. It's then you have to figure out, okay, how do we deploy this to the people that are going to be impacted by it? Because we need to get them ready for this change. This is net new. So are we going to be fatiguing them from a change perspective by giving them iterations every week, or new processes every week or 2 weeks? Or are we better off sort of, okay, we've prototyped this one, we've got 4 more to go, and then a month from now we're going to say, okay, here are 5, 6 new processes all at once. So, again, I don't have the answer of which one's better, because it really does depend on the appetite for change and how ready people are for change. But this is where continuous improvement really sort of starts. I like to say that continuous improvement is best when it's done continuously, but it has to start somewhere, right? So, this is why you take a slightly different approach when you're developing those processes from the outset. It can be taxing on people who are not open or not ready to change, to accept that change.
And I think I want to go down this road because all the work around agile and being iterative is around it usually sits in the digital space. But to be clear, that product needs to support something. Like it's not just out there. So it supports a business process, or it supports a customer needing something to get done, which supports a business process, which leads to a business process. So you can't have one team that's like throwing things out there while the business team is like is not keeping pace, because those changes to a product change the process. And if you're not keeping pace, to me, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And which so is I think you need to really think about that when you're doing this type of work.
And that's exactly, probably one of our main hypotheses in our talk is like, if you're making transformational change and you don't see process and people, even worse, people as needing to change as well, and you see it strictly as a technology thing, you're in trouble. Like, you're going to be in trouble eventually, because new digital products create the need for new processes to support those products, and those don't
and at the speed at which you're doing the digital products.
Correct.
Just
ideally you're doing them at the same time, so that the digital product actually does what it needs to do, and the process, like it's catches and throws, right? The digital product does something to create a trigger for some action to happen in the business, in your business as usual. So does the throw from the digital product coincide with the business catching it and being able to then do something with it? Or are you just like collecting data and that then sits in a file until somebody comes along and says, oh, we haven't seen anything from that new digital product, and there's like a million lines of transactions that need to be manually entered,
or all kinds of messages that are just sitting there, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. No one told. I didn't get the memo.
Right. So you have to expect that when you've got a new digital product, there's going to be a new process. You can also then reverse engineer from the process to the product and say, okay, we've got this new process. We know that we need a product to do X. Here's what the process should be like. And as a result, here's what the digital product needs to do, or what data does it need to collect, or how does it need to function, so that we can enable the business process. So it's just, are you working sort of symbiotically, or are you working in or do you continue to work in silos the way that, admittedly, most businesses do? They don't see the symbiotic nature between all of these different elements.
I remember we had this conversation when we had our great guest Lynn on, where we talked about how, it's not service design, process, digital product. Like these things are all symbiotic, and they all need to be. It doesn't really matter where you start, but they all need to be incorporated in creating that customer journey, customer experience, the business experience, getting your what you need from your process, so you can actually meet your business needs, because you do have those.
Which I think then creates another challenge, which is because they are so aligned, they need to have sort of an equal playing field. They need to be of equal importance, because you can't say, and I'm doing this because I'm going to pick on service design. You can't say that service design is the most important thing, and that the process and the technology will acquiesce to service design. Like there needs.
Yes.
You like that? I'm just dropping all kinds of words here. But you can't do that. Just as you can't say, well, the process is the main driver, the technology and the service design will do what the process says. There needs to be collaboration, there needs to be alignment, and there needs to be this recognition that, you're all doing it for the same thing, for the same reason.
Right.
But you can't have like one person who trumps the other parties to the improvement, because then 100%. It's always going to be their way. You know what I mean?
Right. And it can't be their way or the highway, Vince, because
it can't happens. Be. Well, eventually people take the highway because they're like, I don't want to. I'm not dealing with this. Like, why am I constantly fighting? And so in the end, and I've been saying this a lot more, and this is not an original line from me, but like, it's about doing the right thing, and doing the right thing is always the right thing. So do the right thing, and sometimes that means that the service design needs to lead, because that's the most important thing for that customer or that user. Sometimes the process is the driver. Sometimes the technology is the driver. In the end, it's about working collaboratively and doing the right thing for the people you are there for your customers, for your staff, for your organization.
Drop that mic, brother.
I just did. It's funny. Like sometimes these, especially when you get a topic in your head, and I think you do it because you just legitimately want to know more. And by the way, I really enjoy that. But sometimes these can come across like an interview.
Yeah.
Tell me about a time you redesigned a new process. And
tell me about a time.
How did you engage the stakeholders? And it's like,
yes,
it's funny because like we're still just having a conversation, which I guess is the best interviews. That's what they are. But I like these ones because I get to nerd out on the process stuff.
Well, I think it's important because we sometimes we leave things behind, and like there's always like, oh, those people are always doing the cool stuff, and they're talking about MVPs, and it's like, well, remember that MVP means something back in the business, so there should be an MVP there, and there should be this thought about how do we kind of cross-pollinate these frameworks. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, you talk about agile. I've been reading some pretty, I am not an agilist, but I appreciate some of the things.
Agilists?
Agilists. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been reading some stuff about, how agile has sort of strayed from its original intent. Like it was intended for software development. And so it's now being applied everywhere. And so it's sort of, it's not doing what it was supposed to do. And so what you'll see probably in the next 3 to 5 years is agile as a discipline will disappear. But what will happen is the best parts of agile, the best components, will be stripped, much like what happened with Six Sigma, for that matter, will be stripped away and will either integrate with other methodologies or new things. So the good things, the good tools, they still will continue to be valuable. It just won't be part of quote unquote agile.
Right. So I've also heard that.
Ooh.
So
all right. So we read. We both read stuff.
I read.
We read.
I read. I listen to podcasts too.
Yeah, we read stuff. Yeah. So because again, doing the right thing is always the right thing. So use the tools that are going to get you what you need, and whether that's from the DMAIC methodology for Six Sigma, whether that's agile and building MVPs, whether that's DMEDI or DMATIV or whatever for design for Six Sigma, whether it's service design, whether it's doesn't matter. Do the right thing and figure out the best way to do things, and and know that there are ways to treat processes like products, and that's all I've got to say about that.
All right, fantastic. I think it is a good place to end it then.
I agree. So with that, this has been episode number 60 of the Business Not As Usual podcast, the big 6-0. We will catch you in the next one. See ya.
All right. See ya.